it was different. It felt different this year, and in a good way.
That competition, what do you want to see from those guys to be ready?
Well, it's all of this is to prepare them for, look, let's not lose track of the number one goal when camp starts. It's to arrive at the right 53. We spend a lot of time on that because, look, you don't want a player in your camp that ends up leaving and excelling somewhere else. And so how do we get the exposures? Do we get enough exposures of these players so that we can make the right decisions? And so it's all geared on the right 53, the right practice squad. There's a lot that goes into that. And so, we're rooting for them all. We're coaching them hard, coaching all of them hard. And regardless of how they got here, at this point, we got to go by what we see.
Sean, it's a lot.
Did anything happen in this group of workouts to influence how you do the quarterbacks in training?
No, it went how I wanted it to go. And again, I've said this not only at that position, but man, the inside backer position, the corner position, the safety position. We'll have a plan when we start camp, and then then we begin to make some decisions relative to reps, all that. But right now, it kind of went like we expected. A lot of good things and a lot of good stuff to coach off of, things to correct.
Sean, in the month you've had the rookie class, what do you think of their, progress?
Yeah, look, you try not to be like an instant evaluator, but I would say I was encouraged. I was encouraged after the draft because with each of these selections, it doesn't always fall this way. But after Bo, we're then in the third round taking a player. Ellis, we had a second round grade on. Then we get to the fourth round, we have a second round grade on Troy. The fifth round, we have 2 third-round grades on the runner Estime and Abrams Drain and so on, and even to our seventh rounders. And so that doesn't always happen. Obviously, it can't happen if you don't have a lot of picks, but we were close to our normal number of picks again. And then, the validation, they belong. You get to see the early first impressions, and then we hold reservation till, we get the pads. But I was encouraged with this class.
Sean, you think Jim Bright's the only coach on staff this year that you hadn't worked with before? One of your first impressions?
Yeah, they've been good, and I think some of you have a chance to visit with them. I had him briefly as a player. He reminds me I cut him. I think he came here. He played a long time. He's extremely smart. And even last year in the process, he was going through a hip replacement surgery, and so I was trying to hire him, but he was going to have trouble with that. And so, he spent that year, last year, just working kind of I'd say as more of a consultant with Illinois. And he was able to do that where it was going to be harder for him to commit. And so when this year came around and the opportunity presented itself, we're getting someone with experience. We're getting someone with coaching experience as well. He's been coaching at the college level now for quite a while and was a candidate to be the head coach at Wisconsin. I've kind of known him for a while, and he's one of those guys that not only myself, I would say a number of people in the league have tracked and said, this guy, has got a real good future as a coach in this league.
What kind of resource can he be to the returners, not just in the secondary?
Look, he did a lot, and I think that we'll lean on him in all those areas. But yeah, he really had a good career and was a part of a lot of winning teams too. The Jets, I remember competing against, the Jets had two real good seasons there. And he was a part of those teams with Rex. He was in Baltimore here. I mean, he's had a few stops, but, when you play that long, he's doing something right.
Coach, yesterday, Alex Singleton said that guys are flying around faster now than at any point last season because of the continuity with the offense and defense. Yeah,
I think that helps too. Year two in what we're doing, and I think the competition helps. And we're younger. Clearly, we're younger, and we shouldn't be afraid of that. We embrace it. So, there's probably a combination of things that have gotten us to where we're at right now.
I believe Davis Webb is also talking to us today.
I think so.
How integral was he during the pre-draft process, working out guys and determining who you were going to take?
He was a part of it, and the one thing we tried to do as best we could is isolate the opinions. In other words, until the meetings. In other words, we're going through the process, and then we're getting to the final meetings, and then hearing the read. And so, Joe's had extensive background with the position, Pete Carmichael, certainly Davis. And so we had a number of resources along with our scouting department, and that really helped us arrive at the best decision. And so we took advantage of that. And I knew that going into the process that we would be experienced there and have, a number of so-called expert eyes for that position.
So you seem so much more comfortable this year, whether it's with us, whether
I do.
Yeah, whether it's maybe you know where to drive back and forth to you. Is that the youth that's reinvigorating you? Is there something about just being somewhere in second year?
Look, there's probably a little bit of that first year where you're pissing on all the trees, and I'm probably guilty of that. But I think it's the thing. Look, I got into coaching and teaching with the idea that I was going to be a college coach, hopefully maybe in the Big Ten. And then this career is interesting. It'll take you places that maybe you didn't expect to. And I've always, when young coaches will ask, you always talk about being present, where you're at, where your feet are at. And then the other stuff kind of takes care of itself. And that, I would say, happened with me quite a bit. And so the reward of seeing someone develop and accomplish and then gain confidence, the reward of that constantly comes with new players, with veteran players, and it's kind of addictive.
When it's time to construct the running back room ultimately, how do you measure who these backs are as individual talents, and then who they are stylistically as a back?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I can point to an example. It's one of the harder positions to evaluate in this type of setting. Now, you get to see the passing game, but there's been 2 or 3 instances in my past where what I thought a back was going to be was entirely different when we got into pads. And I can think of, just even in Dallas, Marion Barber, the late Marion Barber, Julius Jones, the same. And it's one of those positions that really gets a little bit clearer when you see them in pads, running, blocking. I can recall, a free agent tryout we had that I thought was going to be more of a scat back and then became a much more physical runner than we ever expected. Alvin Kamara was a different player than we thought we were getting when we drafted him. We drafted a guy who was the number 2 back at Tennessee. We saw Joker traits, and then the first handoff in the first preseason game, he goes 52 yards for a touchdown, and all of a sudden we might want to run him off tackle. And so, but that's hard to see here, but it's easier to see when you get into training camp and in the preseason.
Have you been able to figure out anything about the kickoff in this process? What you're going to do?
Well, listen, we spent time on it, and I would say one thing that's going to be necessary, our budgeted time, for instance, that we're so used to in the kicking game, that's got to be able to adjust, because the last 3 years, you'd put in 2 kick returns. Any more than that, you'd ask yourself why, because you weren't getting the opportunities. So I don't think it'll be the amount of returns that requires more time. I think it'll be the unique change to what we've all known, and so that's going to require more time in training camp. And I think it can be an edge for us, and I expect it to be.
Are you telling Lutz to try all the different kicks, or was that him?
No, he'll mix it up because, you try to anticipate, the perfect kick hits inside the box and goes into the end zone, right? If the kick doesn't hit inside the box, it goes to the 30. If it goes out of bounds, it goes to the 40. if it goes into the end zone, it goes to the 20, or excuse me, it goes to the 30. So it's got to get into the box, in the box, into the end zone, 20, and so you then got to predict. Now you're too deep, everyone will be, and those guys are going to have to be a little bit like infielders that have to react to knuckleballs, that have to react. So as you begin to vary your kicks, there is a little bit of, all right, what's your confidence with accuracy? You don't want to hit someone in the back of your own team, the ball spotted right there, So I think what we'll see in the first 3 or 4 weeks may be different. It will be than in weeks 12 through 14, 15. I think you'll see that teams quickly adjusting to what's working, and so that'll be exciting.
How much are you going to miss the surprise onside?
I think you should ask Indianapolis that.
What does a good summer break? It's obviously their time, but particularly for Bo, do you want him? How much progress can he make, or is it about getting away from football?
No, there's a happy medium there. It's important these guys get away. I think these guys will all lift and run. There's they've got their computers. They go to Teamworks. The weight program's there for them. I know a group of them will gather. I think all 3 of the quarterbacks and a lot of the receivers are going to have a week after the 4th of July where they'll go somewhere and work out and train. Cortland mentioned that yesterday. And then, having the playbook, having the film, all of them, at that position, you shouldn't have to worry about what those next 5 weeks are going to be. And quite honestly, I said to every one of these guys, at some point we've discussed every one of you guys in depth, and it's not always the discussion for when you're here. It's also like how we feel like you're gonna work when you're not here, and so I think they understand that. I think although it's a young team, I think they're pretty smart.
Sean, when I look at your staff, I see at least a couple of future head coach possibilities. Does that speak to the overall quality? And how do you know, when Bill knew about you or you knew about Dan?
Well, it never felt like Bill knew about me. It's kind of I would say this, it's an interesting league. We went through, you hear the term, it's a copycat league, so there's success with, let's say, a young Sean McVay, and then there's a couple of years where I'm getting calls from GMs asking me about not only candidates on my staff, but other candidates, but it was always, well, we're interested in an offensive play caller, and I said, so you're not interested in the next Bill Belichick? So I think, and then this past year, we saw a number of defensive coaches. We've seen special teams coaches. John Harbaugh I work with in Philly, and we've seen offensive line coaches. And I think there is a little cycle to that, and I think ultimately, you're looking for and projecting who can lead, and sometimes I think it's a little bit like the quarterback position. You might have a talented prospect that ends up maybe in the wrong place, and in 3 years, he's back in a coordinator's role, and who knows if he ended up at another place. So, but I've shared that story with you with the late Mr. Benson coming to me, those early years saying, hey, we've got all these coaches getting interviews for head jobs. And I said, Mr. B, we need to worry if no one's interviewing them. And so, I love seeing what Dan Campbell's doing. I love seeing Dennis Allen now, Doug Marrone, a number of these guys that I've worked with, and I want that for them, and so it's hard to predict, though.
Sean, you talked a lot about the ingesting and processing ability of Bo. What have you seen now that you've had him?
Yeah, and listen, we gave him a lot. We gave all 3 of these guys, and of course Jared's a year further along relative to, understanding it. But the 2 younger guys, and I say the 2 younger guys, the 2 new players, both Zach and Bo, man, there was a lot of install in a short period of time. And realistically, in the season, you spend a week on one plan, and in here, we're moving. So overall, though, it's what we saw and what we evaluated, and that's encouraging.
Sean, how did your international player Thomas Yasmin look in the spring?
Not bad. I got to get used to the Aussie accent when you're expecting a punter or a kicker, and he's a tight end. But I think he did a pretty good job. Yeah, I think he belongs.
You spoke about life-work balance for your players. What about for you as a coach? Is it easy to unplug, and how important is that for you these next few years?
I think it is. Look, these guys. I told them today in the team meeting. Otherwise the keys would have been in the ignition tomorrow. And so, for me, it's, look, I've just got a few vices. I'll golf every day, and then come back and get ready to go. So it's a little bit like getting ready to get on an aircraft carrier July 23rd or 24th, and for the next 6 months, you're off. And so there'll be a few off-season projects. I've got a folder of a couple things I want to do, but I'd say it's a little easier after your kids are raised, when they're out of the house. Because one of the things when they're younger is you find yourself traveling a lot, and then that time goes quicker when you're traveling, in cars, airports, and all of that. So, but yeah, all good.
But how much do you stress that to your staff too, especially you guys haven't worked as long, their as coaches are with you, to try to get away?
Yeah, these guys will do that. They all have different plans. Some are going to weddings, some are going to, depending on where they're at. Mike Westhoff's plans are much different than Davis Webb's plans. And so it's one of the things. There are a number of things now that make this job more attractive than the college job. They're not spending these 5 weeks recruiting. There's just a handful of things that are even more challenging today, obviously, with the changes we've seen. So, I think all of them, I've kind of visited with most of them about their plans, and I think all good.
As you go into the spring, what do you know about your team today that maybe you didn't know when they walked in for workouts 7 weeks ago?
I think the players that we signed, drafted, or signed in free agency, man, we felt the new faces. We felt really good about. You can root for them, but you don't always know. But defensively, there's a handful of free agents that we signed that are going to contribute, and they're going to be valuable pieces, good teammates. Offensively, and then even the rookie free agents. We did a personnel meeting yesterday and kind of went through 91 players, in about an hour. We just talked about each one, how they're doing, and I think that overall, that's what I know differently than before the spring began.
Yesterday, Court was taking questions and says, "Hey, are you going to be at training camp?" And he led with, "We'll see." How involved do you get in those conversations upstairs, and what level of importance would you put on this specific situation?
I think this is important, and Courtland and I met this morning for quite a while. We have a good relationship. He's important to what we're doing, and look, he didn't have to visit with the media. I told him, it's up to you if you want to do it, and so to his credit, he did, and so I would say he's important, and I think he knows that.
Josh Reynolds, was that excused today?
Yeah. We just backed off today. He had a good day yesterday, and I forget, he had a strain. There was something that we just said, hey, let's hold off. So he'll be fine.
Thank you, Coach.
All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll see you guys.
You had the quarterly.